Trent 2 Township in the county of Lenore. Lenore County was a farming community. It was a very wealthy farming community in that the land in which things were grown was very fertile, very fertile. One of the persons in my life who I believe is a father figure to me, and for whom I owe great debts of gratitude for the way he helped me as I was growing up, was my Uncle Gerard. My Uncle Gerard was a farmer. He also raised chickens, and he raised cows, and he raised pigs. But he also, when I first came to know him as a boy, was a farmer. He went to North Carolina State University for a while to learn farming practices, and as we had our conversations through my early life, he let me borrow a book of his that talked about how the land is prepared. How is the land prepared? And I found that extraordinarily interesting. I don't know why necessarily, but perhaps because I knew Advent was coming in the year 2012, and I would want to talk about it. It appears that once the harvest is gathered in, I don't know what the current practices are, but in those days, they first would bring a disc harrow out, and the disc would break up the surface of the land, break it up into smaller chunks, and then they would bring out what would be called a rake or a harrow, which had stakes that came down, metal pieces that came down, which then broke up those clods of earth into something much finer. And then the farmer would come along with a turning plow and would turn all that lovely prepared earth underneath. And then the same thing would happen. They would bring a disc harrow and break that land up, those large chunks of earth up, and then they would break them up into a finer preparation, and then that land would lie fallow until spring for planting. Some point during this process, someone from the county office would come out, and they would take soil samplings, and they would determine what was the chemical nature of that land, or that things had changed a lot from 2,000 years ago, when they just planted and hoped that things would grow. They would take a sample of the earth and find out what kind of chemicals would be needed, what kind of fertilizer should be needed for the crops which would then be planted later in the year on that soil. All of this is rather arduous, but, well, it was a time when people would be busy during the winter making the earth ready for the spring. And there were some parts of that community where the earth was so rich and so black and so full of energy that those areas would be special places that seeds would be sown and seedlings would be taken up, would grow, and then they would be lifted up and replanted in other places because that earth was so rich. Many times I've remarked to Stephanie and to her mom that if you actually travel on Wilson or go to 84th Street and go toward Wilson Avenue, that way, you will see on the northwest side and the southwest side of Highway 84, you will see some of this rich black earth, which I marvel at. You feel as if you could take one of these candle holders and put it in the earth and it would sprout, because the land is so rich. There's such a vibrancy to this earth, and so it's so powerfully gifted with the energy out of which things grow. I use this analogy today because I think that throughout history, when we read the Old Testament, we are looking at, I believe, a long time of preparation. A long time of preparation of the proverbial earth, of the proverbial land out of which things are meant to grow. We find in the Old Testament things which we don't necessarily understand, but they are explanations, evolving explanations of the way God is active in the world. And some of the things that we read in the Old Testament, of course, we go, this cannot possibly be right. This cannot possibly be the kind of God that is, well, worthy of worship. I keep referring back to the book of Job and the things that God permitted Satan to do to Job. I mean, this just feels so completely unfair. And we think think of all the damage and things that took place when people sinned and the earth would open up and the earth would close back over them. Or we think, of course, of the Passover. We think of the Passover in which the angel of death visited those houses of the Egyptians and took away all those children. And we wonder sometimes how all of these things are nurturing to us, and yet they are meant to be explanations. They are meant to be theological explanations of an evolving understanding of the nature of God, as challenging as they may be. And in Advent, as we journey ourselves through our own preparation, and I won't ask you to raise your hand if you have been prepared, because I believe you have. I believe you have. But we go through a period of time in which we wonder and we consider what the meaning of those events which are about to take place, what the meaning of them truly is, and how it will affect us as we move forward in this world. I think that all of the understanding, the things that we read in the Gospels, those things that are referred to as the law and the prophets to which Jesus was trained, and we believe became quite expert in speaking of and to. We think of those as being the kinds of things, they're the kinds of things which prepare the earth, prepare the Adam, the earth people. Prepare the earth people for the coming of something extraordinary. And we think in all of this that there must be some most wonderful, wonderful, fertile place that is especially rich in tradition and understanding and humility. Rich in all of the things which I believe made our beloved Jesus that person that Jesus came to be. That person which, when joined with the loving embrace of God and with the energy of God planted so firmly into this human being, we find a richness, a special place for the special seed. So like the black earth in eastern North Carolina or here in western Michigan, we were given Mary. We were given Mary. And today we celebrate Mary. We honor Mary. We remember her. We remember, and as we think about her, we can see ahead. We can see ahead to what she must endure. There's a wonderful, wonderful art song to a poem by Murica, by Hugo Wolf. It's called Auf eines Bild. Auf eines Bild. It means of the picture. And in this picture is a beautiful, wonderful, bucolic scene of a young woman playing with a child. Playing with a child, and you can see the child is a happy child. And the poem says that here is the child, and behind the child you can see the tree. You can see the tree upon which that child will meet his fate. One of the gifts that I believe of this particular congregation is that when I look at you, I see the fertile earth. I see the rich, rich soil. I see the wonderful, wonderful depository where the gifts of God, where the seed of God is welcome. It can be nourished and has been nourished. And as we look to Christmas, to the birth of this child, I invite you to permit the birth of that child and all of the things that that child stood for. I invite you to welcome that child's birth into your hearts, into the fertile soil, the prepared ground of your hearts.